Snow came down that morning like ashes from an old fire. Gentle, persistent quiet. It blanketed the world in hush and turned the earth pale and weightless. Silas Boone, alone as always, stood at the edge of his barn, running a gloved hand down a splintered post. A loose hinge rattled behind him, but he didn't turn. He knew every sound this place made, every voice the wind had stolen and returned in whispers. The land stretched out white and endless, a world where even grief got buried deep and forgot its own name. He tugged his coat collar up higher, turned toward the house, until he heard it. A voice. Small, trembling. Not the wind this time. "Sir." He turned, and time seemed to slow. There she stood at the edge of his field, bare legs poking from beneath a thin, torn skirt. Snow clung to her dark braids, her cheeks wind-bitten red. She couldn't have been older than 6, but she held herself like someone twice that, like someone who had already been told too many times to hush. "My mama's too weak to walk," she said, eyes wide, voice steady despite the cold. She had the baby. For a breath, Silas didn't move. Then he saw it, behind her, half hidden in the snowfall, a crude sled fashioned from 2 fence rails and a strip of torn hide. On it, a still shape lay swaddled in blankets. He moved toward them without a word. His boots broke the crusted snow in deliberate, even steps. When he reached the sled, the cold bit deeper, not into his skin, but somewhere older than bone. The woman was barely conscious, her face waxy and slick with fevered sweat. One arm curled weakly around a bundled newborn, whose tiny chest rose and fell with the shallow rhythm of new life. Her dress was soaked through, blood spreading like rust in the fabric. Her breath came in soft gasps, white against the air. Silas looked down at her. He didn't ask what happened. He didn't ask where they came from or why they were alone. He simply knelt, slid his arms beneath her, and lifted her as gently as he would a broken-winged mare. The little girl followed behind, her small hand gripping his coat. Inside the barn, warmth fought to live. 2 horses shifted and snorted, their breath fogging the space. Silas laid the woman on a fresh pile of hay, then turned to stoke the old iron stove he'd set up for calving season. The girl hovered beside her mother, brushing ice from her skin with one sleeve. "What's your name?" he asked, voice low. "May." He nodded once. "I'm Silas." She didn't nod back, just pressed her lips together and leaned into her mother's side. The woman stirred. Her eyes fluttered open, dark and unfocused, but she saw him. She tried to speak. Failed. Silas knelt again, pressed a water skin to her lips. "You're safe," he said. "You're warm. You rest." She blinked slowly. Her lips moved barely. "Thank you." That night, he stayed in the barn. Couldn't bring himself to leave. The wind howled across the plains like it was mourning something lost. May curled up on one side of her mother, the baby between them, small and quiet. Silas watched the shadows move along the rafters, one hand resting near his rifle, the other near the stove. He hadn't invited them, but they were here now. At dawn, he rode into town. The general store was already buzzing with early trade, grain, nails, gossip. The bell above the door jingled as he stepped in, and heads turned. Silas Boone didn't come into town unless he had to. Folks said he lived like a ghost, said he talked more to horses than people. When he reached the counter, he dropped a list on it. The shopkeeper, Harlan, squinted. Blankets, herbs, cloth, baby milk. Silas didn't explain. Behind him, he could feel them whispering. "Reckon he took her in," someone muttered. "That half-breed girl, and the woman too. Heard she ran from some settler. Don't surprise me. He always had a soft spot for strays. Won't end well. Nothing good ever comes from mixing blood like that." Silas let the words hang in the air. He said nothing, took the supplies, paid in full, and left without meeting a single eye. The ride back was colder, but the sun tried to break through the cloud veil. When he returned, May met him at the gate. "Mama has a fever," she said, her voice strained but not panicked. She held herself like a little soldier, chin lifted, fists clenched. He nodded, passed her the sack. "Help me with the water." For 3 days, he tended them. Changed bandages, boiled roots, crushed herbs his mother once taught him to use. The woman's fever broke slowly, sweat soaking her collar and temple. May never left her side. On the 4th night, the woman sat up. Her voice was hoarse. "My name's Winona." He didn't ask for more. She looked around the barn, eyes settling on the horses, the stove, the saddle he'd used as a pillow. You didn't have to do all this. I know. A long silence stretched. The wind had softened outside. She looked down at her baby, swaddled and sleeping. His name's Blue Sky. He glanced at her, then at the child. Good name. May brought him a tin plate with half a biscuit on it. Mama said to give you something. For helping. Silas took the plate and sat beside the fire. He chewed slowly. The biscuit was dry, but it felt like the warmest thing he'd eaten in years. That night, May sang softly to her brother a lullaby in a language Silas didn't know. Winona closed her eyes, and her face eased. He didn't sleep. Just sat there watching the fire flicker, knowing that something had shifted. Something that wouldn't shift back. When morning came, the barn was quiet again. But it wasn't the same kind of quiet. It wasn't the hollow silence he'd grown used to. It was the kind that held breath. Waiting. Like the land itself was listening for what might happen next. A week passed. Maybe more. Time didn't move in the barn. It simply stretched and softened like the melting snow. Winona's strength returned slowly, as if her bones had to relearn how to carry a body that had known too much pain. She walked now, though with care, one hand braced against the beams as she moved through the straw-littered floor. Blue Sky nursed with quiet hunger, and May rarely left her side, her small figure flitting through the shadows like a silent sentinel. Silas said little. He brought firewood each morning, checked the horses, boiled water. He noticed everything, how Winona's cough lessened, how her fingers grew steadier when stitching, how May's eyes flicked toward the door at dusk, listening for sounds that weren't wind. They hadn't asked to stay, and he hadn't told them to go. But the world outside hadn't gone quiet. It was a Tuesday when the first knock came. Not at his house, but at the barn, the only place in miles with a warm stove and the scent of life clinging to its beams. Silas opened the door slowly, rifle held behind the frame. Deputy Ward Keller stood there, his breath fogging in the cold, his badge tarnished and slightly crooked on his chest. He wore a look that didn't belong to justice, but to someone who enjoyed finding things out. "Morning," Keller said, though there was no warmth in it. "Heard you took in a woman and some kids. Half-breed, some say." Silas didn't blink. "You heard wrong." Keller took a long step forward, boots creaking, in the snow. "Ain't from around here, is she? Might be someone's property, depending who you ask. You know how folk talk. I don't listen to M." "That's so." The wind howled past the door. Behind Silas, Winona stood near the hay, her arms around Blue Sky. May was crouched behind a feed sack, her small hands gripping the edge. Their silence filled the barn with a new kind of tension, tight, drawn, ready to snap. Keller leaned slightly, trying to peer around Silas. "You hiding her?" Silas's voice dropped, firm as stone. "Ain't hiding anyone. Just giving shelter from the cold. She don't belong here." "Neither do you," Silas said, stepping out enough to block the man's view. "Unless you got a warrant or a real reason to be on my land." The deputy squinted, chewing on whatever words threatened to rise. Finally, he gave a tight nod and turned, boots crunching with each step. But he didn't walk off clean. He paused near the fence, glanced over his shoulder, and spat into the snow. "You always were strange, Boone. Don't be surprised if your kindness comes back to bite." Silas watched until Keller's figure disappeared into the tree lean. Then he shut the door, bolted it, and turned. Winona stood rigid, lips pale. "He'll come back." "Maybe," Silas said, "but I'll be here." That night, the barn was too quiet. The usual peace felt broken, like a window cracked and left to whistle. Winona sat near the stove, rocking Blue Sky. Her eyes, once dull with sickness, now flickered with something sharper, fear mixed with old memory. "Back where we came from," she said, voice low, a man came with sweet words. "Promised safety. Trade. But he lied. He beat my brother and burned our food stores. Took me when I had no one left." Silas sat near the wall, head bowed. "I escaped before the baby came. Walked for days. May never complained." She glanced toward her daughter, asleep now, curled against the horse's flank like a kitten. She carried firewood on her back, even when she was shivering. Silas looked up. "You did what you had to." "I kept moving, until I couldn't any more." A silence passed between them. Then she looked at him, really looked. "Why'd you help us?" He didn't answer at first. The fire popped. "Lost my wife 8 winters ago. Buried her on a Tuesday. Folks came the day of. Never saw him again." He paused. "Barn's been too quiet since." Her hand trembled slightly as she placed another log on the flame. "Thank you," she whispered. He nodded once. That was enough. By the next morning, the cold had dulled. Sunlight trickled through the cracks in the boards. Winona was up early, mending a shirt for May from an old feed sack. Silas brought a plank of oak and a hammer, began building a crib near the stall. They worked side by side, not talking, but something passed between them all the same. May swept the floor with a makeshift broom and hummed to herself. Even the horses seemed calmer, their snorts and shifting softened. Later, while checking the trapline, Silas returned with a letter, left at the gate, tucked under a stone. He handed it to Winona, who opened it with steady hands. Her eyes moved across the paper and then narrowed. It was from the mission school. *, we were made aware of your situation. There are better options for the children. We're willing to take them, no questions asked. Warm beds, proper food, and education. *. Winona folded the letter slowly. Her jaw was tight. They want to take them, she murmured. Silas didn't speak. He could see the flicker of shame in her shoulders, the rage hiding beneath. It was a polite offer wrapped in cruelty, meant to convince her that leaving was love. "I won't let them," she said quietly, crumpling the paper. "They're mine. They stay with me." He nodded. "Then they stay." She looked at him then, startled by how quickly he said it. "Even if they come, they'll find nothing here but a man who minds his own, and a woman who knows how to fight." Tears welled up, but she didn't let them fall. Instead, she stepped forward close enough to touch. "You sure?" "I'm sure of what I see," he said, "and what I see's worth protecting." She placed her hand against his chest, not a kiss, not a promise. Just connection, human and real. That night, the snow began to melt. A drip from the eaves. A breeze through the rafters that no longer bit. The barn, once a place for animals and ghosts, now held something close to family. Outside, stars broke through the cloud cover. The land waited quiet and watching. Inside, the baby stirred and May whisper song in the dark. And Silas, standing at the barn door with a rifle across his shoulder and hope stirring in his gut, listened to it all, knowing they were safe for now, and whatever came next, they'd face it together.